Can Amazon prevent Nomadland, a little movie about a woman who lives in her nomad, a Best Picture win at the Oscars this year? Hey everyone, this is Kevin the Apptrepreneur, and well, you might be looking at this a little confused, because we're talking about a movie on the Apptrepreneur channel, and the Apptrepreneur channel is not known for talking about entertainment, except in very, very rare cases. How rare? Well, I have two other channels, the Failed Journalist and the Apptrepreneur Media, where I talk about entertainment. The Failed Journalist is where I talk about movies, animation, comic books. The Apptrepreneur Media, that's where I talk about DVDs, Netflix, Disney+. So really, the entertainment should not come on the Apptrepreneur channel, which is primarily about tech and, to a certain extent, not as much these days, gig work. So, but I'm talking about like tech things here. And yet, we have a very rare situation on why we're talking about this movie. And there's a few reasons. The first reason is because Nomadland is awesome. It's one of the best films of the year, and you can stream it for free on Hulu. Now, it's also playing in some movie theaters, and of course, I would recommend you see it in a movie theater. I think that's a much better way to view this movie. I think the quiet nature of the film is a little bit harder to appreciate at home than a movie theater where your focus is on the screen, as opposed to at home where you've got your phone and, the dog is there and the kids need you. So, but hey, I know there's still a pandemic, and I know some people don't even have the option to see this in theater, so see it on Hulu if you need to. But here's the other reason I'm talking about. It's because some politics have come into the movie that I think are related to Amazon as a company and how they treat their workers, and how really movies like this may inadvertently almost hide the fact that Amazon is a terrible company. And we talk about Amazon worker conditions all the time. In fact, we talked about the union vote basically being busted yesterday, and so this just seems like a very, very natural follow-up. And before we go any further, because I know some people are going to say that the title is clickbait, I am not making this video saying that Amazon itself is trying to prevent this movie from winning an Oscar. That is not what I am saying. That's not the intention, but the Amazon factor in the movie might actually be a last-minute detriment to the movie winning Best Picture. Now, first of all, what is Nomadland about? Well, Nomadland is about a woman whose husband died, and she lives in a town that was reliant on this particular plant to make money. The plant shut down, and as a result, the zip code was discontinued, and everyone was basically forced to leave the town. Now, her husband has died, and the savings was not that good, so she decides to reinvent her life as a nomad. And the Nomadlanders, I think they're called, something like that, basically decide, they're going to give up the expensive life of a house, of a picket fence, of a high apartment rent, and they're going to buy a nomad, which by comparison is a lot cheaper, and they are going to live in the nomads. In fact, what's really cool is that there is a YouTuber, a real-life YouTuber, who actually has kind of started the Nomadland living movement long before this movie was made, where he makes YouTube videos about what you need to live out of your nomad and how you can maximize your pension and stuff like that. And he's actually in the movie, which adds such an air of authenticity. I actually looked up his YouTube channel afterwards. Very interesting guy. I might even try to get him on this channel to talk to him at some point. But that said, there is another element in here, because one of the things that the main character in the movie named Fern, and yeah, that's her name, I know, but whatever. Deal with me here for a second. That one of the things she does to make money, because she doesn't have like a huge retirement or anything, she's living in a nomad basically out of necessity. The guy who's on YouTube, he did it voluntarily, and he's trying to help people transition. She was kind of forced into it. And one of the things she does to make money is she has to work at Amazon during a seasonal time period. And the movie addresses something that Amazon does, but it does it in a way that is almost nice to the company. And in fact, the book that it is based off had some much harsher things to say about the company that is just being glossed over. And that's actually getting people to kind of look at this movie that has won all these awards. We're talking about Golden Globe, the BAFTA Award, most recently Directors Guild of America, which, by the way, whether the movie wins Best Picture at the Oscars or not, the director, Chloe Zhao, will most likely win Best Director at the Academy Awards. Well, they're now looking at this movie, and they're seeing some issues with it. And I kind of want to go over this article by the LA Times by Josh Rottenberg, because I think there's some very good points made. And we kind of have to talk about what did Amazon's influence potentially have over this movie, and do the critics have a point when they say that the movie maybe is almost protecting Amazon and its treatment of the workers? So let's look at this article. A quietly poetic drama about people living all but invisibly on the margins of American society, director Chloe Zhao's Nomadland has made a considerable amount of noise and been anything but a fringe player in this year's topsy-turvy award season. For the record, some people are going to actually ask what I gave Nomadland in my review, and if I remember, I'll post a link to the review below. I forgot what publication I wrote it for at the moment, but 4.5 stars. So again, this is a wonderful movie. However, since its premiere last September at the Venice Film Festival, where it won the top Golden Lion Prize, Nomadland has racked up virtually every award in its path, from the Golden Globes to the Producers Guild America Awards to this past weekend's BAFTAs. Heading into the Oscars on April 25th, the Searchlight Pictures release is nominated for 6 awards, including Best Picture and Director, and is widely considered the film to beat. But being the frontrunner brings with it an added level of scrutiny, and Nomadland has come in for its share of criticism since its release in theaters and on Hulu in February. And this is something that Awards Daily blogger Sasha Stone talks about quite frequently. When your film becomes the frontrunner, it puts a target on your back because there's a lot of politics and PR work done in the Oscars race, where basically the underdogs or the person second in place, they'll write hit pieces, they'll try to manufacture criticism, and who knows, some of this controversy might even be manufactured by a competing movie studio who has a movie that they feel would have a chance of winning if Nomadland got taken down a few pegs. So let's kind of keep that in mind. But again, I don't think all the points being raised are necessarily incorrect on this. So, even as many have praised the film for its sensitive, authentic depiction of internet workers, there's my stutter that I have to work through again, others have griped that it glosses over the harsher realities of the modern gig economy, and in particular, what it's like to work in an Amazon warehouse and participate in the company's seasonal CamperForce program. Now, what is the CamperForce program? Well, let's take a look at the Amazon CamperForce program on Amazon, just so that we have a clear idea of what this is. So here's how Amazon sells the job. What's it like to work for Amazon CamperForce? The Amazon CamperForce program brings together a community of enthusiastic RVers, okay, I guess that's what they're called, RVers, for seasonal work camping job opportunities. Come help make our Amazon customers smile by working in one of our state-of-the-art fulfillment centers. You could be picking, packing, and shipping customer orders in a highly technological and safe work environment. I don't think it's a very safe work environment, for the record. I think that's total bullshit, but you know. All it takes is applying, reserving your own campground spot, showing up, and making history. Really, because I don't know a single person who is aware of this CamperForce thing, so much for history. But anyway, so Amazon CamperForce provides the following benefits: full-time and part-time opportunities, camp pay, and this is important, by the way. CamperForce associates receive $120 weekly to go towards their campground expenses. It should be noted in the movie, Fern, who is working for Amazon, actually has an issue with her her campground expenses when she finds out that Amazon is not going to pay as many of those expenses as she initially thought. So I want to point that out because moments like that show that the movie isn't entirely insensitive. They're just being very careful on how they criticize Amazon. Assignment completion bonus of 50 cents each regular hour worked and $1 for each overtime hour worked paid after assignment ends. Overtime varies per state and not guaranteed. I think things like that are funny. Like, we'll give you 50 cents extra per hour. That's that's what, $4? Like $4? The fact that Amazon actually thinks like $4 is a legitimate bonus. I mean, geez, it's almost like Uber bonuses, but we won't get into that now. Medical and prescription coverage available after 90 days. So hey, if you have medical needs, things like that, Amazon will cover them, maybe for up to 90 days, and then you're basically SOL and on your own again. You have overtime pay, which I think would be a given, a weekly pay schedule, a 401k, and a referral bonus. Here's the thing. This is all seasonal, whether it's full-time or part-time. So the fact that a 401k is basically pennies on the dollar. I mean, yeah, it's something, but if you're old and you're living in your RV, that 401k is really not going to go very far in the long run. So this is pathetic. And I can see what Amazon does with this. They take advantage of people who are living on their own. They offer some bonuses to go towards campground expenses, which, by the way, this does not cover a campground expense. They give you pennies for bonuses, and then they let you go. I mean, and then basically you're kind of dependent on Amazon for your living, if you will, because now Amazon is helping pay for medical. They're paying for your land. Now, some people might say, well, isn't that any job though? I mean, if you want to pay your rent, you are determined to work for whatever job. Well, again, most jobs don't help you with your rent. If you were working at, say, Costco, and this is just an example because Costco pays their employees very well, and one of the perks that Costco offered was, we're going to pay $500 of your rent. Like, that's a bonus from us. Like, that's not even anything, that's not coming out of your pay. That's something we're doing. First of all, that would be kind of awesome. But then it really makes you think twice about, well, not working at Costco after a while. And that's basically what Amazon's doing. They see that these people are desperate, that they're in their RVs, they're in their nomads, and it would be nice to park those nomads someplace. So, hey, give you a job, we'll give you 50-cent bonuses, and hey, we're going to help pay for your camp space. And it makes people dependent on Amazon. So, you know, it seems on the surface that this is a very predatory program, very much like everything Amazon does. But let's look at what the critics have a problem with. So, in a recent op-ed Times, ProPublica reporter Alec McGillis, author of Fulfillment, Winning and Losing, and One Click America, argued the film, which is centered on the experience of a nomad named Fern, played by Oscar winner Frances McDormand, sidesteps what he says are dehumanizing and potentially injurious working conditions at Amazon. Quote, the visual power of the film and its emotional core, Fern's grief over the loss of her husband and her former life occupy the audience's attention, not Amazon's problems, McGillis wrote. One could easily come away from the movie having a benign view of the toll Amazon takes on its workers, including the temporary ones, which, you know, I totally understand where he's coming from, but I do disagree to a certain extent. Now, critics see the film adopted by Zhao from journalist Jessica Bruder's 2017 book Nomadland, Surviving America in the 21st Century, as a missed opportunity that omits the nonfiction work's most damning passages. Of course it would. Others counter that the critically acclaimed picture is a stirring character study, not a work of muckraking journalism. And I think there is some truth to that. This is not a movie. I think had this movie focused more on the Amazon workers' plight, it might have unintentionally turned the movie about something else, because ultimately at the end of the day, the movie is like a human uplifting story about people who actually find meaning in life when life has basically, you know, brought them down to a point where they are now pooping in buckets and living in their RVs. Now, I will say something that the movie doesn't act like Amazon relieves them of these problems. I mean, Fern only has a few months to work there, and she will consider going back, but she's taking odd jobs here and there, and Amazon is not part of the solution. They really are not. So, there's that. But I do think that it might have, really hit home. It's interesting, I should say, that Amazon isn't shown nearly as horribly as it could be, but all these other jobs almost seem beneath Fern. So, I'm just going to say that. The debate has gained traction in recent weeks amid a closely watched and ultimately unsuccessful unionization effort by workers at an Amazon facility in Bessemer, Alabama. I believe it was Alabama. Yeah, it was Alabama. And that might be why this movie's coming into more scrutiny right now, because there was a unionization effort attempted in Alabama. It failed, and there's some very suspicious reasonings for why it might have failed, and now a movie which features Amazon in the story, and it doesn't seem to be addressing the problems. Now that's putting a critical spotlight on the movie, where originally this was not seen as a problem. Now, the union push highlighted what many Amazon critics say are punishing working conditions in the company's warehouses, with workers relentlessly driven to perform monotonous and physically taxing work at an ever faster rate in order to hit algorithm-mandated targets, subjecting themselves to potential repetitive motion injuries, criticisms that Amazon's long pushed back about, because of course they're going to. Now, Tim Shadix, a legal director of a California nonprofit advocacy called Warehouse Worker Resource Center, said of the movie, "I thought there was a lot about the film that was very beautiful, but it left more than a bitter taste in my mouth. I felt like the portrayal of all the work in the film, but particularly the Amazon work, paints a very misleading picture of what our economy is like. It shows Amazon as a place to make money and enable someone's personal journey, not really dealing with how dark it is that you have companies that are taking advantage of often senior people who should be retired, but because of economic circumstances are working in horrifically dangerous jobs." And I totally agree with that. Because you know what did happen to working a job for 20, 30 years and getting a pension and getting a gold watch? I mean, look, I know some people say, look, it's not the company's job and to take care of people. And you know what? I kind of agree to a certain extent, but what does it say when it's like none of those jobs, it's not only not their responsibility, it's not even their priority. They actually go out of their way to stifle people. And that's why, by the way, my dad pushes me all the time to get a state job, because a state job will give you something that most jobs won't: a pension. YouTube's not going to give me a pension. If I become a success on YouTube, I have to save my earnings. Well, I actually am kind of a success on YouTube, but I have to save a lot of those earnings, because if YouTube goes away one day, too bad. In a statement, Amazon spokesperson Andre Woodson told The Times, quote, "We are very proud of our innovative CamperForce program." Yeah, I love how they say it's an innovative CamperForce program, because they figured out how they could take advantage of people who didn't have a whole lot and desperately needed 50-cent bonuses. Like that was something like that's a big deal. So they were innovative in finding out how they could squeeze these people who are desperate to get workers. So anyway, I'm not going to dignify their response with a response, because we know they're lying. While researching her book, Bruder spent a week working in an Amazon warehouse in Texas and witnessed some of its potential dangers. She writes of one 70-year-old CamperForce worker, Chuck Stout, who was stationed near a conveyor belt when a box flew off and knocked him down, causing him to hit his head on the concrete floor. After Amazon's in-house medics determined he hadn't suffered a concussion, Stout was sent back to the job that had him walking some 15 miles a day. And if he wanted to go home, I guarantee you they would have given him a point for going home, and you're allowed 3 points before you're fired. The book's central character, Linda May, who plays herself in the film, developed a debilitating repetitive motion wrist injury from operating a handheld barcode scanner for hours every day, with pain radiating along the entire length of her arm. Working through the Christmas rush, Bruder writes that Linda May felt like a cog in the world's largest vending machine. These stories are not uncommon by any stretch of the imagination. None of these hazards are seen in the film, however, in which Fern is shown packing boxes and placing products on shelves on shelves in an Amazon warehouse, declaring at one point that the gig is, quote, great money. Now, I will say, I think that's taken that scene a little out of context, because if you kind of read between the lines, you can see what's really going on. She is being confronted by a friend who knew her, knows that she used to live in a house, no longer lives in a house, and says, I hear you're living in a Nomad now and working at Amazon. It's like, And it's like, so how do you like that? Just like, oh, it's great money. And it's like, yeah, you can kind of read between the lines. It's like, it's not great money. It's not really what she had in mind. It's not what she wants to be doing. So I think that criticism's a little unfair. Now, that said, there is a reason why these criticisms might have validity, and I think it also goes to show the power Amazon has over the production, because how did the filmmakers even be able to film in an Amazon warehouse if there was even going to be a suggestion that Amazon might not be the best place to work? Well, it might have something to do with this. To gain access to shoot in an Amazon fulfillment center in Fernley, Nevada, McDormand, who also produced the film, wrote a letter to Jeff Blackburn, Amazon's Senior VP of Business and Corporate Development. Quote, it was right before they started giving people $15 an hour, McDormand told the Hollywood Reporter last year. This was a really smart move for them because we are telling a story about a person who is benefiting from hard work, and working at the Amazon Fulfillment Center is hard work, but it pays a wage. That's basically why these things are glossed over, and why Amazon let them do this. Because, I mean, here's the thing. I think if you look closely and you read between the lines when you watch this movie, they're not exactly endorsing Amazon. In fact, I think it does have an anti-Amazon vibe, but nothing specifically is spoken out against Amazon. So from Amazon's eyes, some people might be looking at this, in my opinion, some delusional people who really don't know what goes on at those warehouses, and they might actually come away and say, oh, well, Amazon's good. They're actually giving her a job, even though she could have a much better paying job and she could probably live in a house, and Amazon is actually almost encouraging people to live in their RVs by giving them bonuses to live on camper sites. So, you know. Now, by the way, this is the guy who's in the movie, Bob Wells. He has a... his channel is called Home on Wheels Alliance. And he argues that the criticism of the depiction of Amazon in Nomadland, while understandable, is ultimately misplaced. Though he has personally never worked at Amazon, over the years he has spoken to many nomads who have. While he has heard first-hand accounts of how physically difficult the work can be, particularly for older workers, he says the CamperForce program, which launched in 2008 and operates at more than 25 Amazon facilities across North America, is in high demand as a way to make good money relatively quickly. He says, I think people are conflating the regular Amazon employees that are there year-round, year after year, with the CamperForce, and I'm not sure if that is a fair comparison. The truth is, I think the CamperForce is treated reasonably well. I think people are taking their massive hatred for the corporate world, which in my mind is 100% valid, and they're trying to shoehorn the CamperForce in there as evidence to back up their argument. No offense, Bob, that's because it is evidence against it, but, you know. Corporations do need to be controlled, but the CamperForce isn't a prime example of the fault. I think if you're basically healthy, the CamperForce is a very good thing. Yeah, but that's kind of what everyone argues. Hey, if you're healthy, working at Amazon is not that big of a deal. The problem is it's so strenuous that it quickly becomes unhealthy. And really, the CamperForce program has the same job as the regular employees. They're just not doing it all year round. And, you know, if that's the measure for this being a good program, I think that's a pretty poor measure, but, you know. So, anyway, Amazon also, by the way, has a reason to want this movie to maybe have a little bit of a black eye on it, because Amazon itself has movies up for Oscars, including Borat's subsequent movie film, One Night in Miami, Sound of Metal, which has been nominated for Best Picture and is equally excellent, I want to add, and Time. So, what's my opinion on this? And I know this has been kind of a long one. My opinion is that I think Nomadland probably could have done more to address the abuse at Amazon, and I understand why people are upset about the film. Now, I don't think it normally would have affected the film's chances to win an Oscar, but it did come. Now is kind of a weird time. This is when the Oscar ballots are going to start being mailed. Amazon just defeated a union vote using very questionable methods, and now you have a movie where people work at Amazon And while the movie is not exactly endorsing Amazon's business model, it's not holding their feet to the fire the way most think it should. I also think this is a PR campaign. This usually is what happens with frontrunners, and I do think that Amazon might actually have a stake in this. After all, they have a movie in the Best Picture race, and they have several movies in smaller categories. I wouldn't be surprised if Amazon would want to see this movie taken down a few pegs, and by the way, it would be a very Amazon thing to do for them to basically manufacture controversy about their own company in a competitor's movie so that they can, of course, go on TV and brag about how great the CamperForce program is, and that Amazon pays $15 an hour even though they took away the stock benefits and some health benefits to do so. You know, this is definitely probably a manufactured story, but hey, it's now one that people like me are talking about it on channels that don't normally talk about these things. So I personally already don't think Nomadland is going to win Best Picture. I think it will win Director, but after seeing Minari, I have a really hard time seeing voters not picking that movie. But I mean, if you want to bet the safest Oscar bets, pick Nomadland for Best Picture. If you haven't seen it, it is on Hulu, and it is wonderful. It's a great movie. It's one of my favorite movies this year. And yeah, I wish they had done more. But then on the other hand, that's kind of the reoccurring story. Every time a movie comes close to holding Amazon's feet to the fire, it never seems to actually get made. And that has probably more to do with how powerful Amazon is than anything else. But I think it's an interesting launching point for what people's perception of Amazon is, because movies like this have a chance to actually educate people on what goes on, and they don't. And is that a good thing or is it a bad thing? I mean, I know that the director didn't want to take away from the personal journey of Fern, but maybe Amazon's cruel business practices should have been part of the journey. I'd like to know what you all think, though. Comment below, like, favorite, share, subscribe, and as always, flame responsibly. Have a good one.